Hey, how are you doing?
Hey, what's up? Good. How are you, Julian?
Really good. Yeah, I'm
All
doing
right.
great.
Excited that we're getting this show on the road. I was looking forward.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about that. I think it's time for
Nah,
a new
I
computer.
apologize for yesterday. I was out of it. There was no way I was up to it. So I apologize for that. But here we are.
Great.
Um, Basically, what we're talking about over here, net neutrality, which this is really the hot topic these days that everybody's going on and on about. Um, Now, just to give a little background of why my position is that net neutrality is horrible. Now, everybody wants the same goal, right? Everybody wants better service at a cheaper price. Everybody wants that. There's nobody that doesn't want that. The question is, what is the best way to attain that, right? So, in that, you have two options. Either let the market do what the market does and has been doing for the last while, and that is encourage competition. Competition always delivers better goods at a lower price. That's one option. Now we're going to get into that. There are blockages in the way of the market operating freely right now, but that also should be done. Those things that are stopping them, which is government, which we'll get into, should be done away with. Then the other option is having government step in and implement certain laws that on the outside they're claiming will give everybody good service at an affordable price. Those are really the two options that are going on over here. Net neutrality says that let government step in and they'll ensure that everybody's getting good service at a fair price. And repealing net neutrality is saying that we can attain better service at a better price without the government. So obviously this is the surface of it, and we'll get more into detail. I believe leaving it to the market is the best way, as history has shown. I guess you could let me know why you disagree with that, and I will take it from there.
My argument in this debate it will be a lot like my argument when I talked to Bronson. So first I'll contend your points and then I'll move along with that. And since this is actually the fourth time I've debated this, I hope to introduce not because I feel like I didn't do well in the other debates, but I feel like it's time to introduce some new arguments that are organic and and my own. I feel like, and just kind of push forward with this status quo of the argument itself. Um, I guess so what you're saying is that you want the best thing for the best price, and that you think the best way to get there is more competition, and you think your criticism of the others is your other side is that you think this idea of blocking that's not crystal clear. Are we on the same page about that?
Yes, we are on the same page. I mean, I'm not sure if you know, it's something that's called it's government
Mm-hmm.
kickbacks. Really, where it's more on a localized level, where local governments are charging the ISPs far more than it actually costs to set it up.
Mm-hmm.
According to most reports, just about double what it really costs. So that's really what's stifling competition. That's really what's stifling these smaller ISPs from starting up. What it is it's what they call it's pre-deployment
Mm-hmm.
barriers. But I guess we continue. We'll get into more. I'll explain more what it is. But basically, it's local governments. It's governments that are really hindering competition. Anybody from hopping into the fray.
Okay. Um, so when you say more competition, internet is pretty cheap right now. So, I mean, what's the difference between this? How does this improve the status quo? Because it's cheap right now, and I don't know. I mean, what you don't like about the internet? Like, what do you? I mean, I want like, what? How do you think that what is this competition that you're talking about, and how will it improve through the market? Is my rebuttal. And I think when you talk about local governments moving forward, that kind of leads into to one of my counterpoints. But first, let me start by saying that there's something going on here that isn't really answered, and this is actually the biggest reason why I think net neutrality is a good idea. And I've talked about this in my other debates, is actually privacy. And this doesn't come up in this debate a lot. I try to mention in all of my debates on here. the thing is with privacy, the internet service provider, not a website. So it's a kid, like, you sign on Facebook, they can trade all your information and you agree to that when you sign up for Facebook. Well, right now it's actually illegal for your internet service provider to do that. And Verizon got in trouble for it. But under these new, because I see it more as re-regulating. So under these new regulations, they can do that. The ISP can sell your information. So I think there's a big privacy issue here, and which moves along to this idea of they're blocking and they're slowing down. Interestingly, there's a new bill, and it's actually a Republican bill, and it makes throttling illegal, but it leaves the privacy thing out, and it leaves some of the issues because the way this actually started, and it goes back all the way to 1996. It starts in 1996 with they wanted to chart. It was actually Republicans and Libertarians who were for this idea of quote unquote net neutrality at the time, because they were saying that they should charge schools and libraries because more people used, because the service was used more there, so that was where more of the data was going. So they thought they should have to pay a higher bill. They thought they should bill it at a different rate. So that's actually where this started, where they said you have to kind of all bill it at the same rate. But moving on, but the thing is, in 2006 and going on to 2015, they wanted to introduce a sort of a two-tier service where you would pay extra to have better streaming video and better services, and then that's where this thing, net neutrality, kicked in. But the interesting thing about of course, now you have the Republican bill. I mean, I don't know, that hasn't passed yet. So since this has passed, which is the difference between now and my other debates. So you have this Republican bill that says that they can't do throttling and all this sort of thing, but at the same time, it doesn't solve the privacy issue. And then go into this quality thing. Will they do that? Will they not do it? Well, the whole history of anything that you can compare to this, I think there's a lot of history that's relative to would they do it or not do it. And of course, I don't have a number I can throw out there, but I mean, it started with phone service, because you go all the way back to the beginning of telephones. It was, could you imagine picking up a telephone and everyone was trying to talk on the same line? And so how do you regulate that? How do you figure that out? So that's how this started. And then I think I know one thing I talked about that I thought it was when I talked to Bronson was satellite TV and early cable TV. And well, I don't want to go on too long. I mean, I have some more points, and I appreciate your patience. Do you have anything you want to add into that, or?
Yeah, a number of things. One, you mentioned at the beginning, internet's relatively cheap. So how much cheaper? What more do we want? Well, first of all, it is cheap, but there's no way in saying that it can't get cheaper. There's no concrete evidence to say that we've reached the cheapest that it can get. Which is something that competition does. But besides for being cheaper, competition does many other things. It brings faster service to more areas.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that competition does, and I don't think that anybody would dispute that. But now getting on to your last point, you went on about the history. I whatever the history is, the history, and I'm not answering for what anybody did in the history. I just want to have a logical discussion of what should be done right now. What is the best way of getting better service for cheaper today? Now, I don't know. Do you agree with the assertion that the free market, that bringing competition drives down prices and gives better service? Now, when there's competition, whether let's put it this way, even if there's only 5 providers, 6, 7 providers, if one provider gets up and says, "Hey, we're going to start slowing down certain networks, or we're going to start slowing down certain material," what are those people going to do?
Mm-hmm.
They're just going to go to another provider. The other provider isn't going to do the same thing because they're seeing what happened with the first provider. And if they follow suit, then people are going to go to the third provider. This is basic economics. This is what the free market does. This is what competition does. Why is this specific case? What's the differentiation? What is the differing factor between ISPs, between internet providers, and any other competition in any other sector? unless you're saying that you disagree that competition brings better service at lower cost, you could say you disagree with that entirely, and then we could have that conversation. Or you can say that you agree with it generally, but over here not. And then I'd love to hear why not over
I have
here.
a perfectly, I have a great explanation for that. As a utility, they're selling data, and there just isn't a lot of money in selling data. So they're trying to figure out a way to upsell the same thing that they're selling for more money, basically, by having a two-tier service or charging for separate services. And even this new Republican bill doesn't solve that. It does good things like it stops throttling. But so that's my answer. The market's already
But
done that.
how does that
It's
answer
already
that?
done that.
How does that
Okay,
answer?
so as a
How
utility,
does it?
it's the same idea as if I'm paying for water that comes to my house. It's the same idea. Instead of the way I pay for water and internet now, I just pay for how much water or internet I want to use. Now I have to pay for what appliances I want to use. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then you have to think about a couple of things. And I have some great points I'm going to move into that weren't in my other debates, and I haven't heard anyone say these anywhere. These are totally organic. So the thing is,
So do you mind if I interrupt because it's on something that you just mentioned? So I hate to cut you off, and I'm sorry, but
okay.
you mentioned that it's utilities. I just want to start with that. Why would this be considered a
Well, I
utility?
mean, why wouldn't it be considered a utility? They're selling me data. It's and the, so the, okay. So I'm gonna move. Let me move into my other points now because this really does explain this a little bit better. The reason that it needs to be a utility is that, and this is because of competition. That and this goes back to my point about satellite TV because I don't know if you remember. I was a little kid, and I'm trying not to. I just remember my grandfather and his farm so well, and I talked about it because he was a really powerful attorney here in Columbus, but he retired to this farm in Southern Ohio. But anyway, so he had this satellite TV, and you could get like thousands of channels on it. And this was in the early '80s, and it was out like in the middle of nowhere. You watch the thing outside move around. At that time, all you had to have was this. Everything was in the air. All the TV signals were in the air because all this technology. I mean, that's where it was at. So, and you could watch anything. The only problem was that it was just too good. Because you couldn't. I mean, I couldn't figure out like okay, where's the show I want to watch because it's like there's literally thousands and thousands of channels, and I need things like moving around everywhere. So it was just too good. So what did they come up with? In the 1990s, they came up with K-band satellite, which is where all the companies that were selling the dishes merged together. They came up with K-band satellite, where now you got, it was basically the same thing as cable, but it was higher, so it was higher quality signal, but it was the same thing as cable. So basically, this is the K-band version of the internet. And then this is actually where we're going with the internet, and this is something that seems that isn't talked about enough, is that who is going to be this competitor? And let me first go back to this idea about the utility line coming in. So the thing is, not only if I want to buy water, okay, so now I don't like X water company. Now I'm going to buy, so that must make room for Y water company. Now they have to run a water line into my house. So I have to wait for somebody to make a whole new line to put in my house. But the thing is, we're moving to a point where it's all going to be in the air anyway. So we're actually, and this is what's going on because there's actually, this is to win a battle between the internet being public as a utility where it's provided by the state, our B option, which is what we have now. Internet's going to be through the air. That's what's going to be better than the status quo. We're going to have 5G. It's going to be through a private company, and people are going to choose what they want. They're going to choose the more fair one.
I get
So
all that. I just something that I'm
utility, and they're going to
something.
choose the government over the private service because of this, because they're not going to like the service. People don't want it, and the thing is, there's no loss since net neutrality is put in for these companies to take, and they've invested more money in lines since 2015. That they've doubled their lines. The only time they've invested more money since 2015 was in 1999. So they know this is coming. They put a lot of money in these lines, but the thing is that you can't run a 5G. They don't have an incentive, right? It costs a lot of money for 5G, and they don't have an incentive to put, these companies don't have the incentive to put it in the air. Only the government really has that because of the cost, and they have to rely on the government to be able to put these lines through because it's private property. And this actually goes back to my grandfather's farm, and that's why I want to throw that in there, because he actually was very upset when he bought this property, because he actually sued an electric company. You can look up my name in farm and it comes up my last name in farm. He sued an electric company because he was really upset about them putting power lines through his property, and because it was a public utility, they could do it, and he lost.
All right. So, just a few things on that. One, I still don't get what is the defining factor. What makes something a utility versus not a utility? Are cars a utility? What is the deciding factor that something is a utility? A utility.
How would a car be a utility
Now,
though? A
also,
car isn't a line that comes to my
no,
house,
no.
is it? I mean, why would someone believe
What
that a car is a utility?
what makes something a
It's a line
utility?
that comes to my house, and
Oh, you just mean by the physical presence?
it's the line. I mean, a car is not a line. A road could be it's closer to utility than a car, but
Okay, fine.
it's a line
So,
that provides a service.
So you mean by the physical presence, by the fact that you need something that's called a right of way from the government?
Well, you do. I mean, because it's private property. There's no other way for them to put those lines through. My grandfather was upset as could be about it. It was his private property that no one was supposed to serve him out there. It was like yeah. That was the whole idea of him being out there.
So I'm confused. Do you believe there should be that the local governments should be right now? Anybody could get the right of way. Anybody could get it. Any ISP, any startup ISP can get it. The question is how much the government's charging them. Nobody's denied it. I mean, they're denying them simply because the paperwork and the amount of money that they're charging people are giving it up. Nobody's denied it. If I want to start up an ISP today and I have $1 billion in the bank, I could start it. So if increasing competition would be to lower the charges so that more ISPs could start. When more ISPs can
Mm-hmm.
start, that brings the competition, that brings down prices and a
Mm-hmm.
better service. I'm not sure what part of that do you disagree with?
Okay. Well, what I'm saying here is that it's going to be in the air, and it actually is in the air, that same property, because there's no way to run a line. So it's going to be in the air. The thing is, for it to be 5G, it relies on it being a public utility, because the companies cannot, because look, the antenna that's broadcasting 5G, it has to be connected to a line to work properly. So to get eminent
Correct.
domain, that means that'll only work as a utility because of private property laws.
Therefore, what?
It means that for the company to build a 5G tower, that they need to rely on it as a utility for the government to provide it, or the government's just going to sell it. And that's the option that people are going to
Prior
go
to
for.
prior to prior to net neutrality in 2015, were ISPs able to do so?
Were they able to do what now?
Were they able to use these lines to give everybody internet?
Were they able to use? Yeah, they were. But the thing is, this actually happened when they wanted to introduce this two-tier service, and it was so unpopular in 2015. And they've been trying to do it since 2006. And I mean, I can use dial-up as just as good of an analogy as C-band and K-band. So there was plenty of reason for this. Didn't I mean, it's pretty short-sighted to think that they
So
wouldn't
net
do
neut-
anything.
so net net neut- net neutrality isn't enabling people to do that. They were able to do so before. So what is the net neutrality law benefiting us?
Because by calling it a utility, it's still sparking innovation, and we have access to all the services that we want. It's the same service if there's net neutrality or not. There's just more competition for the service and not the ISP itself. It takes basically it's giving the ISP a lot of power, and it's the same thing as when they switch from C band satellite to K band uh, satellite. The thing is the companies merge together, so they merge together to form DirecTV, just like AT&T and Spectrum are trying to merge together now.
Okay.
So you actually have less competition. So the idea of this new water company not only building a line and coming in, the thing.
So you agree we should have more competition?
Yeah, but it's going to come down to it's going to be the government, or it's going to be these private companies, and even if it's these private companies, they have to rely on it as a utility because they have to be able to power able to power their towers.
Okay, therefore, so why should we not give the private sector the chance to open up competition, which what drives down prices and gives better service? Well, I'm not. Maybe I'm slow. I'm just not
But
getting
you
it.
haven't
What is
illustrated how
wrong
it
with
brings
doing that?
prices down, because I always hear like this is
Competition brings.
it's just an
So that's the
idea
thing. You
though.
disagree with the premise.
It's just an idea though. I mean, you don't have a concrete example.
Has not been proven. There's no proving the concept that competition brings down prices has not been proven.
I'm not saying that it. I mean, I think that selling data is working so well as a utility that they're selling data that they can't make enough money off it. That's the idea, and this actually goes to the idea of 5G too.
Who's not making enough money
The
off it?
companies aren't making enough money for them to build the 5G towers, and that's why they have a new bill and stuff too, because they're not making enough money to build these 5G towers, and that's what it comes down to. If they don't, there isn't enough in them. There isn't enough in it for them right now for them to build the 5G towers. So they want to be able to, and it, and
Actually, there are states like I think there's Kansas, Missouri, and Texas that streamlined video franchising. The franchising laws. They cut back on the laws, and that enabled Google to build out into selective neighborhoods the only neighborhoods that demanded it, which in turn.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, I have that service like that, a recreational property in Southern Ohio. It has a service, it was a private internet service where it's all through the air. And the thing is, though, in Minneapolis, not in Minnesota, it might not be Minneapolis. There actually is, and it's not the only one. They have government internet, and it's free. It's just in the air. It's 5G. Anyone can use the internet through the government. And that sounds crazy.
So you're saying you trust the government more than
No, I'm
private
not saying I
corporations?
trust the government more than private corporations. I'm saying that this service, people are going to buy it as a utility no matter what, and the direction that we're headed toward, it's all in the air. And if people are probably going to, I mean, I understand like why you wouldn't want to choose the government, which goes back to my privacy thing, because this isn't good for privacy. And if the government starts selling it, think about if the government was your ISP and now it's, they don't have, there's nothing to stop them from tracking everything you do when you're logged on there. So yeah, I'm definitely concerned about privacy.
You do understand based on Title II, which is the net neutrality. The government can decide who can have an ISP and who not at their own discretion. You're giving total power, total control to the government.
That's a new argument. I mean, I'm not so much concerned about that. I think the direction that we're headed is it's going to be 5G. It's going to be in the air, and that.
So is your argument based on that? You're saying what's going to happen in the future, and in the future we should implement law now, despite the fact that the way it's set up now, it will besides not only not benefit it, but actually make it worse.
It's going to make it worse. What am I saying that was saying to make it worse?
Do you know that between 2014 and 2016, the domestic broadband capital expenditure decreased by 5.6%, or $3.6 billion?
The companies have no loss. They've increased their profits. I'm not saying it's bad for them to increase profits. I'm just saying they do not have a loss in profits.
No. I'm not talking about their profits. I'm not talking about their profits. I'm talking about capital expenditure. They now know that it's more difficult for smaller companies to come in and bring more competition, so they didn't feel a need for capital expenditure to make their service better. Do you not see that direct correlation?
I'm still not sure how it can be better, because we have all those same services, and it's just we're gonna, and they're already cheap.
Would you say the same? Would you say the same thing 10, 15 years ago, that it can't be better?
But the internet 10 or 15 years ago was a lot different. And let me use this analogy of dial-up. I don't know how well you remember dial-up, but you would try to get on, say, AOL, and AOL was kind of everything. It was a curated service, and you had to have a really nice computer, or the web didn't really work right. And it was also the social network, so you could only talk to your friends if they were on AOL. If they had a different service like CompuServe or Prodigy, you couldn't send them an instant message. They had to be on AOL. And you had to dial up and all this stuff. And it was a curated service, and they monitored how much time you had. But the thing is, at that time, I actually started using a free service, and guess who provided it? The local library. And what was the difference? Why was no one on this free service? because it was really great for information, like getting information, looking things up. It was, but it wasn't good for much else because it was all in text. So there was no pictures, there was no graphic design elements whatsoever. It was literally just a bunch of text on the screen. It was great if you just wanted to read something, and you wouldn't have to wait to get on it. So so yeah, the government is actually a competitor here, and I don't. And
How can the government be a competitor when they don't have a profit and loss incentive?
they have. I mean, if you, I mean, a lot of people pay for their water service through the city. It really wouldn't be much different than that. It's possible.
Water service is actually very different. When you're talking about utilities like that, there's not really much better you can get water. You can't. There's no. You don't need an incentive to get better because there's not really much
Well,
more
I don't
you
think
can do. You
there's a
can
better way to get
make
internet.
better
I don't
pipes.
think there's a better way to get internet. I don't think that breaking the service up would make it better at all.
No, no. You. What do you mean? You can make you cheaper to the consumer. You can bring it to more areas that don't have it, and you can make it faster. 100% you can. Why are you saying you can't?
It's already
What
cheap to
evidence do
begin
you have
with
that you
because
can?
there just isn't enough. There isn't a market that's selling data.
Who said it can't be? Who said it can't be a penny a year? Why are you saying that this is the cheapest it can get for some people? And when you're talking about $5, $10 a year, whatever it is, and you spread that over an entire economy, huge economy, that's a tremendous saving. I mean, wow,
Well,
I'm lost. I'm not
I
sure
think
why.
$15 is pretty cheap. And let's think about like what has happened with the internet because let's go back to 10 or 15 years ago. I mean, I think about the same time I was using that dial-up service and the local library FreeNet or whatever. This conversation we're having would be impossible. It would probably cost me like you're in New York, right? So it would probably cost me like 20 or 30 cents a minute to talk to you. I mean, I remember when my brother's girlfriend moved away around that time,
Okay.
and she actually her parents got upset and made her find a job because of the phone bill.
And I agree. So and it got much cheaper since then, correct?
It's about the same actually. If I remember right, AOL was actually a little more expensive. It was like $20 a month, and you couldn't use it the way that we're using this now. See, that's another reason why like you would pay
So
your $20 to
are
use
you
the
are
free
you
one anyway.
saying that are you saying internet has not gotten better and cheaper?
It's definitely gotten better and cheaper, but the thing is, it's kind of the end of the line for competition, or at least we're getting to the next step, which is open air internet, and it's going to come down to
Why
the
is it the end of the
government
line?
or a private service, and so those are the two competitors.
So again, so you're basing your argument on what is going to happen in the future.
I mean, yeah, it's where we're at. It's where we're at now in the market, basically.
It's not where we're at now. Where we're at now, I don't see how you can disagree with the fact that competition would drive down prices and deliver better goods,
I'm just not sure
just
what
like
I'm not
anything
sure what
else.
you're talking about. Like, what is better? Like, I'm not sure what's different than the status quo here. I mean, I'm not sure I haven't heard what's
Faster,
wild about this.
faster, faster service.
How is it faster though? I mean, I can pay for the speed I want now. Like, how is this faster?
What? Here's the hypocrisy. What's the problem? People are saying that without net neutrality, what's going to happen? What are service providers going to do?
Well, I mean, there's no reason to not believe they wouldn't do the same thing that the phone companies did, or the satellite provider did, or the cable company did, or the same thing that happened when they found a better with dial-up, or the same thing that happened in 2006 when they wanted to do a two-tier service, or in 2015 when they wanted to do two-tier service, or 2015 when they were throttling people, and 2015 when Verizon got caught slowing stuff down. Or I think no, it wasn't Verizon, it was Comcast. They got caught slowing people down who were using services they didn't like. So they've lost a lot of money. They've lost a lot of money just because it's cheap for me to buy internet, and they'd rather think about it. They could sell me all these services. I mean, the idea of like they could sell me long distance phone and all these things that people because these services are obsolete, and they've lost so much money off this that they want to sell the services separate.
Therefore, therefore,
It's
I'm
just
not
not good
sure
for it's
what
not
what.
good for them. But when we get to where we're going, it's just not it's a lot better for them if they could split it up. And what's holding them back is that they're not because selling data is cheap because of market competition. What's holding them back is that there isn't enough incentive. They're losing money off this already to put 5G towers up. and that's so that's where we're headed, and that's actually where this is pointing towards, why we're having this conversation now as opposed to 10 or 15 years ago, and where we'll be in 5 or 10 or 15 years.
I'm lost. The people that are saying that if now that net neutrality has been repealed, right? What service providers are going to do is that they are going to charge more for either overall or for certain websites for certain things, and less for others. Something they call a fast lane. If that's the case, if that's what's going to happen, if that's a possibility, what is the best answer to that? Is the best answer to that let the government step in and take control, or is the best answer to that is let's bring in competition?
The competition's already there. I mean, it's going to be in the air. It just comes down to, because the internet provider, they have to rely on the government to build the lines.
If you're telling me that you're conceding to my point, but you're just worried about, but you're basing your argument about what's going to happen in the future, then it's not an argument. We can't really have that
Well, the
debate.
only
We
other
can't
way
have
to
that
go with that
argument.
is to say that, like, is for me to assume that someone else is going to build a new line to put in my house, which I don't think that's going to happen. It took a lot of time for them to build one line.
Why wouldn't that happen?
Well, I mean, I think the service that we're using was available in 1995, and I couldn't even buy it till 2015. So yeah, I really doubt that's would happen anytime soon. I think the only thing I could rely on is it's going to be through the air.
Why wouldn't that happen? Why wouldn't that happen?
I mean, why would I? It took them 20 years to do it the first time. And they did it. They built the line in 2015 when they built the 50% of their lines.
No. So why wouldn't with competition? Why wouldn't other startup ISPs, smaller ISPs, come in, build lines? If it's not too expensive, then they'd be able to. If the local governments weren't charging them an arm and a leg for the right of way access, which they can get regardless, but the local governments are charging more. Why can't more ISPs come, build lines, and give you a service via their ISPs? Why can't that happen?
Because it's going to be through the air. I mean, why would you want to invest?
You're talking about what it's going to be. Well, there are startup ISPs today, right?
Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's still going to all be. It's going to be
obsolete.
Have
a conversation with today.
The technology is going to be obsolete.
So your whole thing is you agree with it, once it's obsolete, then the whole net. So you don't need net neutrality. Your whole argument is that we need net neutrality today.
It's the same. It's the same thing, because the thing is that what will happen is that
why would you need net? Why would you need net neutrality? There will be abundance of competition. If you don't need right of way access, then there will be abundance of competition. Why do you need net neutrality? The whole reason why people are saying we need net neutrality today is because there's not that much competition, is because there's only a number of big corporations. But if you're saying that fact of the matter is in the future that we're going to be going through the air, then we don't need right of way access, then there's going to be so much competition that we don't need net neutrality.
Let me use this example. Okay, let me go back to the satellite.
I'm not sure if it's mine or yours, but you're cracking up.
Can you hear me all right now?
Yeah.
So with the satellite dishes, you can actually still buy a C-band, an analog satellite dish, if you want to spend a fortune on it, obviously, because no one has one anymore. You can actually still buy one and use it. It's just a big antenna. So all the television signals are in the air. You can still do that. As opposed to the thing, but so all those channels are still on the air, but now we have K-band satellite, and now we have digital. I've never had cable, so I don't really know what to say. But anyway, so now we have cable. The thing is that there's less competition because there's a premium package of channels that they're selling. There's a premium package, so the channels that are bundled together they're selling that you can't get through the air signals. So it's going to come down to the services that people want. It's the same thing as AOL. Or maybe this may be a better analogy. It's the same thing with AOL, and you can't talk to somebody who's on CompuServe. So it's putting a lot of it's putting the internet service provider back into being able to curate the service and being a host that provides these services. So even if it was, so once they're split up, you're buying a bundle through a different company. You're not buying the exact. It's just not the exact same thing anymore.
I'm not sure what I'm missing. I don't see what I'm not sure you illustrate exactly what net neutrality is helping. You're saying why repeal net neutrality if in the future we're going to be going to airwaves regardless. But what is net neutrality? What issue is it solving? Besides what issues it's solving, it creates its own issues.
It's solving the throttling and solving the privacy issue.
But competition would solve that better than the government.
I'm just
having the
I'm
government.
Still not sure like when you what services it is that you're talking about and how like what's worthwhile about them, like how it'll be better or how they're being hindered to begin with, or how the price just
how it's better
anyway.
Exactly. I don't understand what you're saying. You're saying that you're worried that there's going to be a problem with the ISPs, that they're going to throttle. I'm telling you, so bring in competition so that won't happen. Mm-hmm. And then you're saying, what is competition going to solve?
So let's look at the congressional. Let's look at the congressional bill, because I think this explains a little bit better. So why would Republicans repeal net neutrality and then introduce a bill that says that you can't throttle and do all this sort of thing? It's because it's going to become bundled. Why would they do that? Because it's going to become a bundled service, like I'm saying. So it's not really so much that that's a problem. It's bundling the service, and it's the service provider being able to censor and being able to collect information that they weren't before. So it's a privacy issue. I mean, you could even, I'm not going to argue it's a free speech issue with 8 minutes left, but you could say it's a free speech issue in response to your question.
So again, that's a whole nother conversation. With 8 minutes left, we can't really get into it. But say they put into place law that you can't share private information. Mm-hmm. Do you concede that the rest of net neutrality should go away?
I don't favor that having two services. I mean, I don't see, because I don't understand what's worthwhile about that. Like, I don't understand how that's better than the status quo. I don't understand what service we're talking about. I mean, I just don't understand how it's going to be better, or how it's going to save me money. I think
because of the free money, the market.
There's what's better would be it's through the air, and that's what we're going to get anyway, eventually.
The status quo was fine in 2015. The status quo was fine.
They were throttling, and they were trying to introduce the service in 2015, and it was so unpopular that's why the net neutrality was enacted, because of people who were so upset about it that they were calling. And the same thing happened with telephone service, with satellite service, and with cable service.
All right. So actually, actually, that's a point I want to bring up. Cell phone networks are not subject to net neutrality. Why is it that cell phone networks are not having any anti-competitive behavior? Why are they not displaying any of that?
Anti-competitive. I mean,
why is Verizon not saying that if you're gonna call a Sprint phone, or if a Sprint phone's gonna call Verizon, it's gonna be a worse quality phone call? Why is that not happening? Cell phone networks or when they're piggybacking off other networks. You know, they piggyback off towers. Mm-hmm. How come they're not saying that when you piggyback off our tower, it's not going to be as strong as when we're our own service from our... Not subject to net neutrality laws. Why are they not doing
that? That's not the internet, though. That's just telephone service.
But okay, but it should follow the same logic. How come they're not doing that?
Because I'm paying them for.
But yet you're saying
my expectation is I can call anyone. It's just, I mean, it's kind of, I mean, this is on my side.
Okay, and when you pay for an internet, and when you pay for an internet service, you're assuming that you're going to be getting the same service for everything. And if they're not going to provide it, you're going to switch to another internet service provider.
I mean, I might not be able to, though, because someone would have to run a line in. So the best I can hope for is that it's through the air. And
how do you run another line in?
how do
you
I
run
let?
another line in
There's no way for me
by
to run another
letting
line in.
small by letting more ISPs join the fray, by letting more startups come in and create competition. If when they lower the cost, when they lower the kickbacks, and when the local governments are lowering the costs for the right of way access and for utilizing the lines and whatnot, that will let ISPs join. This is if you want to post the link below, this is what the smaller ISPs are saying. They're saying, please, why do you think the bigger ISPs, right, are for net neutrality? The majority of
Mm-hmm.
smaller ISPs, there's a reason why some of them aren't, are for net neutrality. The vast majority of smaller ISPs are against net neutrality. Why do you think the reason is?
I mean, I don't know who they
Is that
are.
not the biggest indicator?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know who they are. I don't know. I mean, if you could post that, but let me use this. Let me use this example. If I don't like DirecTV, I can buy Dish Network or something. But even if I'm buying Dish
Okay.
Network, I'm not buying the same clunky old satellite where I have to actually watch the thing turn. Where I get it, literally get everything, anything I want. It just comes in. It's all just in the air. Now I have to. Now I'm just paying for a service through Dish Network instead of DirecTV, and it's a premium service where if I had that old clunky thing, I could still get it, but it would be scrambled, and I'd have to. I assume you can buy a device still to unscramble it. I mean, I'm thinking back years and years here, and so that's where we're headed.
I know you keep
Yes.
on going back to where we're headed, but we gotta talk about the reality that we're in right. And again, it boils down to two 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 there are two ways that it could happen. Anybody that has any issues of throttling and any anti-competitive behavior, there are two ways of going about it. One, let's bring in more competition, and more competition will give you the better service. They will not throttle. If you're having an issue with your provider because they're throttling, you'll go to another ISP that is not doing that. That's basic economics. Or you say give the government the power. And what the power that the government has is astounding when you look at Title II. There are so many things that they can do in Title II. One thing they can do, the internet is subject to, it says a ton of regulations at the whim of the FCC. They don't have to give any, that they have to submit proposals for any new technology or business model. Nothing. The government is bringing regulation to something that accounts for 1 trillion of our GDP and 2.5 million jobs. We are now subjecting that to government regulation. The ISPs are subject to a slew of taxes, new taxes. We are literally in Article 2. We are giving the government power to do whatever they want with a humongous sector. And history has shown, and it's basic economics, that you leave these things to the market and let competition run. That's the best way of going about it. So I don't understand if you're agreeing that there are issues without net neutrality. Then let the market solve those issues. Let
Mm-hmm.
it be resolved in the market. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't see what net neutrality is doing that the market can't do. And it is creating issues that, like, for instance, being subject to laws and taxes that the market won't do. And I'll let you finish.
The problem with that is that we are headed toward 5G, and that's why we're having this discussion about net neutrality now, because what it's actually doing is it's pinning the service providers, it's pinning the private service against the government service, and it really hinges on it being a service that's provided through the government because of private property, and the fact that even if it's through the air, it still has to be wired somehow, still has to be powered somehow. So for that, so that's what's going to happen is the competition once it's through the air, people are going to want it as a utility because they're happy with the service they have now. So they're going to buy it. The alternative is that they're going to buy it through the government, and that's, I mean, if you want, because I don't think this, because you keep saying that competition is going to fix this, and that's just my analysis of because we've already seen this happen in Minnesota. So I think it's, and because of the examples that I've given with satellite and dial up and cable TV, etc., and the fact that this has happened in telephone service where this began, I think that it's fair to assume that that's probably what's going to happen, and that's And anyway, so yeah, I'm happy we talked. I'm happy we had the chance to have the debate, and I'm
Yep,
happy I had a
I
chance to
really enjoyed.
explain it.
I think we should go for, if you're down, I'm down to go another round because I still think there's a lot more.